morning, November the 19th, from sunny Central Florida. I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
All right, so Jeremy, we're tracking the tropics, and I love this whole idea that looking outside on our satellite imagery, we have absolutely nothing to track right now.
Yeah, no name storms out there right now. Sarah was the last one, and that faded away as it crossed over Central America. And the Yucatan, what it did leave over is a little bit of tropical moisture, and that is pushing towards the Gulf Coast today in the form of some heavy downpours, but no name storms out there.
Yeah, no name storms, no name storms. So to that point, a lot of people have been asking questions like, are we done with hurricane season yet? Jeremy, at least for the moment, it looks like things are pretty quiet. The GFS though, like the 60, and we'll look at the GFS and of course all the model data in a little bit, but the aside from the 6E GFS trying to throw in a little random Caribbean feature, things are looking pretty nice and quiet.
Yeah, and also a good sign that things are probably going to be dropping off or ending here is some of these stronger cold fronts that are poised to make their way through my area, likely your area, maybe even down towards Cuba, the Bahamas. And really, that's kind of the sign. You start cooling the Gulf down. Caribbean's still plenty warm, but the upper levels, maybe some of the wind shear and the support that a tropical system would need, not really there once we get this late into the season.
Yeah, right. So with that said, I guess it's probably a good idea to visit our hurricane season forecast. Take a look back, see how we did, discuss kind of some of the pluses, the minuses, and do the full transparency. What do you say?
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. All right. So highlighted in red along the shoreline, our landfall hotspots. Remember, we put out our hurricane forecast March the 1st. Jeremy, I'd say we did pretty okay this year.
Yeah, so what you're looking at, as Eric mentioned there, the red was our forecast hotspots, and 5 out of 6 landfalls we predicted correctly. The one that was outside of our red area was Beryl. Also, there's one potential tropical cyclone that made landfall. That's showing up on here. We're not counting it in the 6, but really, definitely we had a lot of impacts here. Your area and also my area this hurricane season. My area was more Helene and Debbie, and then certainly you had Milton go through in October.
Yeah, well, we had 3 named storms in 3 months. We had August, September, and October with Florida landfalls. So we had said back on March the 1st, Jeremy, that the Gulf Coast, particularly that Florida Gulf Coast, would be our hottest spot. We were clear on that months and months ahead of time, and that's exactly how the hurricane season played out.
Yeah, and if you look at Debbie and Helene there, notice how those tracks almost parallel each other. That was that was a time frame that we were watching closely, that early August, and then again in later September for that area of the northeastern Gulf. And lo and behold, that went right into that hotspot and also within the time frame that we highlighted back on March the 1st. So
Right.
that was that one, and then the other one you mentioned was Milton that was into October.
Right. So that's the landfall spots. What, 5 out of 6 isn't too bad. I also think we should be pretty proud, honestly, in looking at our preseason forecast numbers. On the right was our forecast numbers. On the left was the actual season numbers. And Jeremy, I think, look, we could sit and we could split hairs and try and figure out what could we have done better, what could we have done worse. But when you try to put out a fairly small range of numbers, I think that we should be as proud of this as possible, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing that we really stressed in March was that there was a greater chance that there may be more hurricanes or major hurricanes this year. A little higher percentage of that 16 to 20 would fall within hurricanes or major hurricanes, and that's exactly what we saw. So who knows? Maybe we have some sort of system or subtropical system yet, and we'll throw another name in. But chances of a hurricane now are getting very, very low.
Right. So just going over the numbers, and Jeremy, you're a much better math whiz than I am. So take a mental note: 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 majors. Those are the numbers. Let's compare the forecast numbers to we'll say the quote unquote, the other guys, or the other
Yeah.
longer range forecasts.
And also keep in mind, and I think anyone that follows us knows this, we don't have any type of like, oh, we'll see their
Right.
forecasts and then hedge our bets. Ours is out March 1st. So we roll with our numbers and then see where the other ones come in. And these are all of the preseason forecasts last year. And again, some of these various organizations did update their numbers, which initially some of them went up as we went from June into July, and then they
Yeah.
started to come back down just a bit. But these were all the preseason numbers. And again, our range is was 16 to 20. NOAA, National Hurricane Center, 17 to 25. Colorado State went with 23, and AccuWeather 20 to 25. I will say pretty much everyone was on board with a number that was within one or two of what we saw for a number of hurricanes and
Yep.
also
Yeah.
major hurricanes. So I think our number when it came to name storms was on that lower end, and it ended up being the number was pretty much split right down the middle for
Yeah.
us with 18.
Yeah. So I, looking back, I'm proud of where we were. I'm certainly going to continue hoping that we carry this expectation of excellence forward, and that our 2025 hurricane season forecast is about as strong at not strong in terms of intensity, but strong in terms of accuracy. I'm hoping that we continue that. But Phil Klotzbach always says, and I agree, long range forecasting can humble you down real quick. So I all we can do is hope and do the most work we can, which you and I are doing as we speak.
Right. And I think we've already started to get clues about next hurricane season. And there
Yeah.
might be one where this one was really backloaded. I think next season may have the opportunity to get off to a faster start.
Yep. Yep. No, I would agree, because looking at that transition into our newer cycling, it seems like it kind of came in hot, got a little bit of a break, and then picked back up. And so to that point, yeah, I think for me, the big question is going to be, was it age? Milton. Yeah. Was Milton old, or was it newer? Is it kind of this carryover from one to the other?
Right. I think that will be a big question we need to answer once we figure out what the cycle duration is and how it fits into the pattern. Even removing Milton, you still had Oscar, which
Right.
did not impact the U.S., but that one was down like the islands area, southeastern Bahamas. And then you had Raphael that went right in to the Gulf of Mexico. It did fade away. However, what we watched last week, and we took big time notes of this,
Yep.
is the remnant low or
Yep.
what was left of it. The low ended up going into Louisiana.
Right. And because of that, you were left without a tropical system, but you had severe weather. There were even tornado warnings there. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a hint. Even though Raphael weakened, there was a hint. Just like tomorrow, my area watches the remnants of Sarah somewhere in from the Big Bend of Florida through the Panhandle, essentially. So there's another hint going into next year. Don't think that that's the recycle of Milton, but there's another indicator. So these are all
Right.
things that you and I get to watch over these next few months and see how they play out again and again, which will help us determine our hurricane forecast for next year.
Yeah, and if you look back at when we were going through this 1 year ago today, we were talking about some lows that were moving through the Gulf, and those weren't even tropical in
Right.
nature.
Right.
So we were already taking those lows, projecting them forward into a more favorable environment where tropical development could be possible.
Right.
So now this fall, we've actually had tropical systems. So to me, that gives us maybe a little higher likelihood that when this recycles next season, that these would be something tropical in nature. But then, as you mentioned, the tricky part is Milton kind of went into the Gulf and then, or I mean, Raphael went into the Gulf, kind of meandered around, faded away, and then eventually the low went up towards Louisiana.
Right.
So I think the tough part for us will be maybe trying to figure out exactly where these lows might go or get the best idea possible. So one thing I hate doing is having huge landfall hotspots, but it's already looking like next year the Gulf is probably going to be one of those hotspots again.
Right. Well, and it may be that we kind of have to shift and look to, Louisiana a little bit more. Like this year we
Right.
knew we had a big hot spot, but we were very clear in our discussion that we thought kind of that Florida Panhandle to Big Bend area was going to be the hottest of the hot. I don't know, I mean, we have to watch in this off-season period to see where, yeah, maybe we've got the Gulf Coast highlighted, but we should have a pretty decent idea of where the greatest hotspot would be, I would think.
Yeah, and sometimes early in the season, we saw this with Beryl. Things might drift a little bit more westerly, and then eventually later in the season, a lot of those were taking those northeast tracks that we had. So we also had Francine this year that did make landfall into
Yep.
Louisiana, and that
Yep.
was another part of the pattern that we had highlighted from March the 1st. So overall, the forecast worked out well, but now it's almost like we're starting from scratch once again. And this is the toughest part and probably the most stressful part.
Where's your paper? Let's see it. Do you have it next to
I
you?
No, I don't have it next to me, but I have been taking some notes, and there's actually been a lot of notes to take this year. I
Yeah.
went back and looked at last year, and obviously we had some lows going through, but we really didn't have a lot of areas of interest. There were no name storms
Right.
in November. So last fall, at least in terms of tropical systems, was quieter than what we've had so far this fall.
So, with that said, then one would wonder if it would be a bit of a, if it would at least hint an early hint at a more active season.
I think so. And remember how this one, I think people were starting to panic when we didn't get all these named storms going in like
Yeah.
June, July, and this was a backloaded season. Well, is next year one where we see the activity that's out there now and it's maybe a little bit more front loaded?
Right.
And then once you get towards fall, things start to quiet down quickly. So it's always tough to get a season that starts super active,
Yeah.
continues the whole time. That's why if you get a season with 20 named storms, you're usually in the top tier of all hurricane seasons.
Well, and we didn't get there this year. So let's look then, Jeremy. Let's kind of see, we discussed briefly, but let's see how this season with the numbers as they are right now, let's see how this season stacks up. So far this year we've had 18 named storms. The average is 14. Last year we had 20. So not as many named systems as last year. So that makes sense, right? I think that there's nothing crazy there.
Correct. And then what you're taking a look at now is the storm names. Last year we had way more, but this year did end up above average, regardless of what happens here in the last 2 weeks or so.
Right. And then of course the ACE numbers. I think that this is always just the best metric to determine the type of season. So last year we had two more named storms, but look at the ACE number for last year, 148. The ACE number for this year is sitting at 161. So higher than last year in terms of overall accumulated cyclonic energy or ACE numbers, but well above both of the seasons, well above the average of 120, Jeremy.
Yeah, so all the metrics from named storms, hurricane, major, ACE, all above average this year. The ACE, though, I mean, it was above average, but we were talking about some of the other forecasts. Some had it north of 200 or around 200 for the season, so we definitely fell shy of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think this is pretty much playing out the way we had thought, which I'm grateful for the science to be able to look back on and grateful for, sidebar, grateful for the chance to get to do this with you. So we're not promising that the season's done. Certainly, we would love that to be the case, but we'll be following the rest of this season to see, and then of course looking forward to next hurricane season. A lot of people are in the chat here on my page and even on yours as well, just discussing, Jeremy, the idea of how they can't believe we're already starting on our next year's hurricane forecast.
Yeah, yeah, here we go. I mean, really, once it flips to October, we start to take those, whether they're mental notes or write them down and track any type of tropical activity or areas of interest as well. So yeah, it is definitely more probably looking ahead to next season at this point than looking back.
Yeah.
So lots of work ahead of us. You mentioned the GFS maybe
Yes.
had a low or something in the Caribbean. If you want to discuss that.
Yep. Yep. All right. So pulling that
And you
up.
said that was on the. I've actually started to look more at like cold fronts and rain and snow and that stuff going on
Yeah.
in other parts of the country now. So
Yeah.
I'm finally able to shift out of tropical mode a little bit.
We've shifted to soup mode in my house, so that goes along with what you're saying there. All right, so here's the 60 GFS. We were looking at this on Coffee Talk this morning on my pages. Just talking about Central Florida weather. First off, there's the moisture, the remnant area of low pressure from what was Sarah, just bringing moisture to our Florida area tomorrow. But clearly that would be an indicator, at least, of a storm system to follow for the hurricane season. Next year, cold front moves through. Watch this. Okay, here's 162 hours. Watch the Caribbean Sea. Love that. That's the November so that's Black Friday. That's Saturday after Thanksgiving, and then it goes into the Yucatan. But at least for a moment, Jeremy, at least for a moment, the GFS is trying to do the most GFS thing it could possibly do.
Yeah, and what we really learned from Sarah was if there is any land interaction, clearly these are not going to strengthen. So if this is something that would stay over water, it's warm enough down there. Maybe we
Yep.
get a late season tropical system, but that even if we get 19 named storms, whatever, it's really not going to really change anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Good time. So hopefully that's not a thing. We'll continue to watch. So all right. Any
So you said
questions?
that was like 10 days out or more.
Yeah, it's like hour 250, 260. It's Black Friday. So it's a week and a half out.
Well, I can, while we have 1 second here, I'll look at the CFS model, and that was around 210, you said?
It starts at like 198 to 2. Yeah,
All right,
everybody
let's see
wants
here.
Tony to be named because of course that's my chief meteorologist down here.
Oh, I'm sure he would love to track one more storm. I don't think he would want that.
None of us want that unless it's a fish storm just to get the name.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's see if. Oh, that's. Hang on 1 second here.
If it was a fish storm, it'd be very much like Tony Manolfi, kind of a little annoying, staying longer than it should.
Yeah, the CFS model, which goes out, I mean, like 700 plus hours.
Yeah.
It also has a low in that general area that you were showing. So, and it does have it like Thanksgiving Day towards
Now,
that Black Friday.
now follow me here. Riddle me this. Oscar. Is that the recycle of Oscar down there?
Uh, I mean, we'd have to see where the eventual track is and take a look at that. But yeah, I mean, the cycle generally is between somewhere between like 40 and 60 days.
Yeah, that would put it
Probably
there-ish, I think.
80% plus of all, or 90% of all the cycle durations that I've seen. But yeah, we'll see what happens down there. But yeah, it's a good thing to see if the low does form down there, and then kind of backtrack and see if we can line it up with something.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, questions, comments, concerns, anybody? Taylor says, I'm definitely curious to see where Milton falls for next year. If Milton is a part of the kind of the cycles going forward, that's the question.
Yeah, I think I mean that really lined up with some of the other one other tropical thing that we sort of discussed in the season, and also that really had a tornado threat tied to it those previous cycles.
Yeah.
And obviously Milton was a huge tornado
Right.
producer, so I think it was not entirely new. Like you mentioned, maybe it was some sort of hybrid where it's kind of in that weird time frame where it's like old cycle, new cycle. But that's one where we'll really have to be laser focused come probably like now, December, and then again January into February if this is see what happens.
Right. If it shows up. So once we figure out the duration, then it's going back and seeing if these new versions have that Milton part of the pattern in there or not. Oy vey.
Hmm.
Good
Yeah,
times.
I mean that's a tough one because also if you think about it, like Hurricane Matthew, that was like October 7th, 8th of that year. Um,
Yep.
so
And I don't
sometimes
remember,
these
was that old, new? I mean, that was before I was really doing this operationally. You had mentioned this to me, but I was not operationally doing this then.
right, and again that was I had not quite moved down here yet. I
Right.
was down helping your station during that storm, so I wasn't necessarily laser focused on long range tropical forecasting at that time. I was still a little bit more in like snow mode.
A little bit more. You were in Wisconsin. But you know what? That does bring up an interesting point. So once I take my notes for today to play catch up, I feel like it wouldn't be the dumbest thing for me to go back and case study Matthew and see how that played out because it, like you said, it was that October, that same time frame. So I'd be really interested to
Hmm.
see if it was old or if it was new or if it was kind of a hybrid. I've not gone back to look at Matthew. I've looked at Charlie Francis Jean. I've looked at at Wilma. I've looked at all these other storms. I never went back to Matthew. Interesting.
All right, that's your homework, right?
Awesome. Yes. You should see the emails he
It's
sends. He sent me an email last
it's
night. He's
not
like, here are the
your
three
homework
graphics
is
I
your
want you
homework's
to
not
make.
due until February though, so
Yeah, no, we've
you
got
got some
time. We've
time.
got time. Yeah. See any other questions here?
No, I don't think so. Just lots of people enjoying the chat, and hopefully no more
Yeah.
storms.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, then I think that's good. Look, we're going to probably, well, look, we've got a couple more days of hurricane season. I think that maybe we should do some sort of an off-season check-in at some point as well, Jeremy. Just
Yeah,
just
that
a
would be
full
great.
just a full transparency. Here's what we're tracking. Obviously, no hurricanes will be going on, but we're going to keep you all updated. We're going to keep with transparency. That way, the March 1st hurricane season forecast, I would suspect, would be at least somewhat familiar as we've tracked these things, right?
Yeah, and I think people want some sort of update along the way, so that would be a good thing to do, especially if we're able to pinpoint a little more some of the recycles,
Yeah.
or hey, these are some thoughts of maybe Raphael's back, or Sarah that low is back, or Oscar, or whatever this thing happens to be down here in the Caribbean, if it's anything.
Right. It'd be kind of fun if we time it out so that it's like, hey, you see the rain that's happening right now? In
Right.
January, guess what?
Yep.
All right. That's all I got, my friend. You good?
Okay. Yeah, we're good up here.
All right. You and I need to chat offline too, as well. But anyway, we'll do
Okay.
that. All right.
All right.
Hey, thank you guys for hanging out for us this morning. Thankfully, no big tropical troubles, just some rain moving through. But we're in soup and cold front mode. Love that. From sunny Central Florida, I'm West 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 chief meteorologist